You ever wonder if we're living in a timeline where the dumbest ideas secretly run the world? A spring that became a toy, a medical device that turned into, well, let's just say it's still a bestseller, and a weapon that was supposed to make people immortal but just made war worse. Turns out, history's biggest game changers weren't exactly planned. The accidental power of gunpowder. In 9th century China, alchemists were chasing immortality. They weren't looking for a world-changing invention. They just wanted to live forever. Instead, they mixed sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter and ended up with gunpowder. Not exactly the fountain of youth, but definitely explosive. By the 10th century, the Chinese military saw the potential. They packed gunpowder into bamboo tubes and invented fire lances, early flamethrowers that turned battles into chaotic infernos. Soon, there were bombs, rockets, and fire arrows. The Song dynasty wasn't playing around. By the 13th century, Mongols had stolen the formula and carried it across the Middle East and Europe. Medieval armies went from swinging swords to blowing through castle walls. Europe took things to another level. By 1326, the first hand cannons appeared in Italy, because apparently swords weren't violent enough. England got its first taste of gunpowder warfare in 1346 at the Battle of Crécy, when early cannons sent French knights straight to the afterlife. The message was clear. Armor was useless, castles were doomed, and if you didn't have gunpowder, you were about to lose a war. In 1494, France rolled out the first true artillery-based army, blasting through Italian city-states with siege cannons. By the 1600s, muskets had replaced bows, and wars were no longer won by the strongest warriors, but by whoever had more gunpowder. The 19th century brought industrialized warfare, with bullets, TNT, and modern explosives replacing clunky old cannons. By 1945, the world had gone from fire lances to nuclear bombs, proving that when humans invent something dangerous, we don't just stop at mildly destructive. And to think, it all started with a bunch of monks trying to live forever. The toilet that revolutionized cities. For most of history, handling human waste was, let's say, a DIY project. If you lived in a medieval city, you either used a chamber pot or squatted over a hole in the ground, and when that pot got full, you tossed it out the window and yelled "Gardyloo" as a warning. Spoiler, no one was safe. By 1596, a man named Sir John Harrington had had enough. He invented the first flushing toilet, which he called the Ajax. It had a water tank and a flushing system, and he even installed one for Queen Elizabeth I. But the idea didn't catch on because, apparently, people preferred the old bucket and throw method. Fast forward to the 1770s, and Scottish watchmaker Alexander Cumming improved the design by adding the S-bend pipe. This prevented toxic sewer gases from creeping back up into homes, a major win for noses everywhere. Then came Thomas Crapper. Yes, that was his real name. In the 1860s, this English plumber perfected the modern flush toilet and made it commercially available. By 1858, London was drowning in filth, literally. The Great Stink turned the Thames into a toxic sludge river, forcing the British government to build a proper sewer system. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the White House didn't even have indoor plumbing until 1825. In 19th century America, outhouses were still the norm, and many cities reeked of open sewage. The result? Epidemics. Cholera and typhoid fever were wiping people out because sanitation was basically non-existent. By the early 20th century, flush toilets became widespread in homes, and city sanitation improved. But in some places, they were still seen as a luxury. In 1940, nearly half of U.S. homes still had outhouses. It wasn't until the post-war boom that indoor plumbing became standard. Today, the modern toilet has saved millions of lives by preventing disease outbreaks. Meanwhile, Japan has taken things to another level with heated seats, bidets, and even music to mask your business. So, next time you flush, remember, you could be yelling "Gardyloo" instead. The potato chip born out of pure spite. In 1853, Chef George Crumb was working at Moon's Lake House, a fancy resort in Saratoga Springs, New York. One day, a particularly annoying customer kept sending back his fried potatoes, complaining they were too thick and soggy. Crumb, irritated beyond belief, decided to mess with him. He sliced the potatoes as thin as possible, fried them until they were crispy and brittle, and drowned them in salt. He expected the customer to be furious. Instead, the guy loved them. Word spread, and soon, Saratoga chips became a hit. The crispy snack became so popular that Crumb eventually opened his own restaurant, where he continued serving his famous chips in baskets on every table. Yet, despite his role in creating an American food staple, he never profited beyond his restaurant's success. While Crumb focused on cooking, others saw the commercial potential and ran with it. By the early 1900s, chips had already started showing up at state fairs, corner stores, and lunch counters. They weren't factory-made yet, just scooped into bags by hand or sold in wax paper cones. But the habit was forming. Salty, portable, and easy to make in bulk, potato chips slid into everyday American life without needing much fanfare. It wasn't a revolution, it was a quiet takeover. Then came Herman Lay in the 1930s. He turned potato chips into a national obsession, selling them door to door before launching what would become Frito-Lay. By the 1950s, the potato chip industry was booming. Flavored chips hit the market thanks to Joe Spud Murphy, an Irish businessman who created cheese and onion and salt and vinegar flavors. By the 1980s, companies were selling billions of bags annually. Today, the global potato chip market is worth over $30 billion, all because George Crumb got petty with a customer. If that's not the best revenge, what is? The stimulator that shocked medicine. In the 19th century, doctors had a problem. Women were showing up at clinics with mysterious symptoms: anxiety, mood swings, sleeplessness, and just general irritation with life. Instead of considering that maybe society was treating them terribly, doctors diagnosed them with hysteria. The treatment? Manual stimulation to induce hysterical paroxysm. Yes, this was considered medical therapy. Doctors hated it. It was time-consuming, exhausting, and they were looking for a shortcut. Enter Dr. Joseph Mortimer Granville. In 1883, he invented the first electromechanical stimulator, not for women, but as a muscle massager. However, doctors quickly realized it could do the hysteria treatment a lot faster. Suddenly, a 2-hour medical session became a few minutes of efficiency. By the early 1900s, electromechanical massagers were advertised in medical catalogs and even sold for home use. They were marketed as health devices for relieving tension and headaches, because apparently, everyone was too embarrassed to say what they were really for. By the 1920s, these became one of the first electrical appliances ever sold, hitting the market before vacuum cleaners and electric irons. Then came a problem: Hollywood. In the 1920s and 1930s, the device started appearing in early adult films. Doctors were horrified. Suddenly, their medical tool had a whole new reputation. By the 1950s, these disappeared from medical catalogs, but it was too late. The secret was out. The real game changer came in 1968, when the first battery-powered cordless stimulator hit the market. By the 1970s, it was openly sold as a sex product. No more pretending it was for headaches. By 1999, it was inducted into the Smithsonian Museum, officially recognized as one of the most important inventions in medical history. A device meant to cure hysteria ended up revolutionizing sexual health, feminism, and personal wellness. And to think, it all started because doctors got tired of using their hands. The Frisbee that started as a pie tin. In the 1940s, college students in New England had an unusual hobby: tossing empty pie tins from the Frisbee Pie Company around for fun. Apparently, after eating a pie, the next logical step was to turn the tin into an airborne sport. When the tins were flying through the air, students would yell "Frisbee" as a warning. This casual campus game turned into an underground phenomenon. Then, in 1948, a guy named Walter Morrison saw a business opportunity. He designed a plastic flying disc, originally calling it the Pluto Platter, to cash in on the UFO craze. Because nothing sells like aliens. By 1957, Morrison sold the design to Wham-O, a toy company known for making weird things profitable. They renamed it Frisbee after learning about the whole pie tin thing. The new name stuck, even though the Frisbee Pie Company had no involvement and got exactly $0 from it. The Frisbee exploded in popularity. By the 1960s, college students turned it into an actual sport. In 1968, a group of New Jersey teenagers invented Ultimate Frisbee, a game that combined football, soccer, and a disc that cost $2.99. By the 1970s, Frisbee golf, disc golf, was born, and suddenly, the world had yet another way to justify day drinking outdoors. The US military even experimented with using Frisbees as weaponized throwing devices. It didn't work, but props for trying. Meanwhile, NASA astronauts took Frisbees to space because, apparently, even trained professionals get bored in zero gravity. To date, over 300 million Frisbees have been sold, proving that people really love throwing things. All because some college students couldn't let a pie tin go to waste. The superglue that was too sticky. In 1942, Dr. Harry Coover, a chemist working for Eastman Kodak, was trying to develop clear plastic gun sights for World War II. Instead, he accidentally created cyanoacrylate, a substance so sticky it bonded to everything instantly. Problem? It was too strong. Every test resulted in materials getting permanently glued together. Frustrated, Coover ditched the formula. 6 years later, in 1949, Coover's team rediscovered the compound while working on aircraft canopies. This time, they realized the insane bonding power could actually be useful, just not for planes. By 1958, Superglue hit the market, sold as Eastman No. 910. The product worked too well. It bonded skin instantly, leading to thousands of accidental finger fusion incidents. But it also caught the attention of the US military. During the Vietnam War, battlefield medics used superglue to seal open wounds in seconds. It saved countless lives by stopping bleeding long enough for soldiers to reach proper medical care. The FDA eventually banned its use for humans due to toxicity concerns, but it laid the groundwork for medical adhesives used in surgery today. Then came the weird applications. Superglue has been used to lift fingerprints in crime investigations, repair coral reefs, and even help weightlifters with torn calluses. In 1980, Coover himself received the National Medal of Technology for an invention he originally considered a failure. Today, over 50,000 tons of superglue are sold every year. Not bad for something that was discarded twice before anyone realized it could literally hold the world together. The duct tape that started as a war fix. In 1942, the US military had a problem. Soldiers' ammo boxes were sealed with wax-coated paper and string, which took too long to open under fire. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was a life-or-death issue. Enter Vesta Stout, a factory worker and mother of 2 Navy sailors. She wrote to President Franklin D. Roosevelt with a solution: a waterproof, cloth-backed adhesive tape that could be torn by hand and used to seal anything. Roosevelt passed her idea to Johnson & Johnson, which developed what we now call duct tape. Initially, it was army green and used for sealing equipment, patching tents, and even fixing guns. Soldiers realized it could hold everything together, including jeeps, boots, and even airplane wings. It worked so well that post-war America refused to let it go. By the 1950s, duct tape got a silver makeover to match heating ducts, giving it its modern name. But it didn't stop there. It became the go-to emergency fix for everything. NASA astronauts used it to repair the Apollo 13 lunar module in 1970, possibly preventing one of the biggest space disasters in history. Since then, duct tape has been used to fix racing cars, patch leaks on submarines, and even build entire boats. In 2003, a Texas man even made a working bridge out of it. Every year, over 1 billion feet of duct tape are sold. What started as a battlefield fix is now every DIYer's best friend. If something breaks, you can ignore it, or slap some duct tape on it and pretend you're an astronaut. The Slinky that fell into history. In 1943, naval engineer Richard James was working in a Philadelphia shipyard, trying to develop a system that would stabilize sensitive naval instruments aboard warships. His focus? Tension springs that could absorb shock and keep equipment steady during rough seas. But then, one spring slipped off a shelf. Instead of crashing to the ground, it flipped, stretched, and gracefully walked down a stack of books. Most people would have laughed and moved on. James saw a business opportunity. For the next 2 years, he worked to perfect the design. He settled on 80 feet of tightly coiled steel, which allowed the Slinky to move fluidly, step by step. His wife, Betty James, came up with the name, a word that means sleek and graceful, and in 1945, they launched it at Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia. The first 400 units sold out in 90 minutes. By the 1950s, the Slinky was a full-blown phenomenon. It had one job: walking downstairs, no lights, no batteries, no complicated mechanics, just pure physics in motion. Yet, despite its simplicity, it became a household staple. Over 300 million have been sold worldwide. But the Slinky didn't just stay a toy. NASA used it in zero-gravity experiments aboard space missions to demonstrate the behavior of springs in weightlessness. The US military repurposed its flexible coils for radio antennas in Vietnam. Engineers used it to study wave mechanics and seismic activity. Somehow, a spring meant for naval ships ended up everywhere. Then came the business disaster. Richard James had a midlife crisis, joined a religious cult, and abandoned his company. Betty James saved the business from collapse, lowered the price, and made sure the Slinky became a timeless American classic. Today, the Slinky is still selling, still confusing scientists, and still proving that entertainment doesn't need an app or a screen. all because a clumsy engineer dropped something in the right way. The bubble wrap that almost became wallpaper. In 1957, engineers Alfred Fielding and Mark Chavans had a revolutionary idea: textured wallpaper. They sealed 2 sheets of plastic together with air bubbles inside, thinking people would love a futuristic padded look for their walls. Spoiler, no one did. Turns out, nobody wanted their house to look like a giant air mattress. By 1959, Fielding and Chavans were stuck with a useless product until IBM launched the 1401 computer. Computers were fragile, and shipping them was a nightmare. The inventors had an idea. What if their weird plastic wallpaper could protect expensive electronics? IBM started using it, and suddenly, bubble wrap had a real purpose. From there, Sealed Air Corporation was born, and by the 1960s, bubble wrap was everywhere, protecting everything from glassware to medical equipment. By the 1980s, it was a $3 billion industry. It even made its way into NASA equipment, protecting instruments sent to space. But let's be honest, most people don't care about its shipping benefits. The real appeal? Popping it. Scientists have actually studied why it's so satisfying. A 2012 study found that popping bubble wrap reduces stress and increases dopamine. Offices started keeping sheets of it around for employees, and in 2001, the first Bubble Wrap Appreciation Day was declared. Then came the tragedy of 2015. Sealed Air tried to introduce unpoppable bubble wrap called iBubble Wrap. The internet lost its mind. People were furious. The backlash was so bad that regular bubble wrap remains untouched. Today, over 240,000 miles of bubble wrap are produced each year, enough to wrap around the Earth 10 times. So, what started as a terrible interior design idea ended up protecting the world's technology and keeping millions of people entertained. The ATM that no one trusted. In 1967, London's Barclays Bank unveiled the first ever ATM, automated teller machine. The idea came from John Shepherd Barron, a Scottish inventor who was frustrated that banks closed early. His solution? A machine that spit out cash 24/7. No humans required. The first ATM used paper vouchers with radioactive ink to verify withdrawals. Yes, radioactive. The system worked, but customers weren't exactly thrilled about handling glow-in-the-dark money. By the 1970s, banks in the US and Europe began installing ATMs with plastic cards and PIN codes. The concept was revolutionary, but people didn't trust it. Many still preferred waiting in long lines rather than trusting a robot with their life savings. That changed in 1980, when Citibank spent $100 million installing ATMs all over New York. Then came the blizzard of 1980. Banks shut down, but ATMs kept working. Customers, now desperate for cash, flooded the machines. ATM usage skyrocketed overnight. By the 1990s, ATMs were everywhere, spitting out cash in airports, gas stations, and even fast food restaurants. Some machines even dispensed gold bars, pizzas, and live bait. Today, there are over 3.5 million ATMs worldwide, handling $14 trillion in transactions every year. But with digital banking taking over, the ATM's future is uncertain. Still, for decades, it let people skip bank lines and withdraw cash at 2 a.m. in questionable neighborhoods. Progress? Absolutely. The rubber duck that became a scientific tool. Rubber ducks have one job: floating in bathtubs and making kids laugh. But in 1992, they accidentally became one of the most important tools in oceanography. It all started when a shipping container fell off a cargo ship in the Pacific Ocean. Inside, 28,800 rubber ducks and other bath toys. The container cracked open and thousands of ducks, turtles, and beavers spilled into the sea, drifting off in every direction. Most people would assume they'd just sink or wash up on a beach. But oceanographers realized they had a golden opportunity. A scientist named Curtis Ebbesmeyer, an expert in ocean currents, saw the floating ducks as perfect trackers for studying how water moves across the globe. Over the next several years, the ducks traveled thousands of miles. Some froze in Arctic ice and reappeared in the Atlantic. Others washed up in Hawaii, Australia, and even Scotland. By 2003, ducks had made it to the UK and New England, proving how interconnected the world's oceans are. The findings helped refine scientific models for ocean currents and even improved our understanding of how plastic pollution spreads. Researchers estimated that only 2,000 of the original 28,800 ducks have ever been found, meaning most are still out there, drifting in the ocean. Today, rubber ducks aren't just bath toys. They've become symbols of environmental research and are even sold as collectibles, with ocean-weathered ducks fetching hundreds of dollars at auctions. So, the next time you see a rubber duck, remember, it might be a lost scientific instrument from 1992 still doing its job.